Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Advent Member Talks. My name is Sam. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Director of Member Experience at Advent Coworking. Advent is a creative co-working community, podcast studio, art gallery, event space, yoga studio, lots of things. But most importantly, we're a community and we love getting to put on this weekly event, which brings on a different Advent member on the topic of their choosing. So if you haven't seen our Advent member talks before, you can check out our YouTube channel, Advent Co-working Videos, and join us every Tuesday at 4:30 here on Facebook Live. So I'm super excited today that we have Amy Williams coming to talk to us about some communication styles. So if you have any questions for Amy, go ahead and type those into the comments and we'll have a Q&A at the end. Amy, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you. I love Advent and I love our Advent community, and I'm always happy to hear other people's talks and to share. And today I'm going to share a communication model that I developed partially from my own experience and also working with therapy clients that I call 7 and above. And I'm going to start just talking a little bit about just communication. Many of you already know how important communication is. I think over the past year, especially of politics and social justice issues and so many things going on in the world, communication has just been, it's been, challenging for a lot of us to be able to communicate with people we disagree with, and to even sometimes in our own family, we might have different political beliefs, or people in our community don't understand concerns about social justice issues. So communication has really been a struggle. And so I just wanted to share this model that I really created from my own painful life experience to be because I needed it. I actually have it tattooed on my arm. If you see me, just ask to see my tattoo, because I wanted to remember this model so much that I have my Wanda Petunia character flying in a plane, and in the clouds there's skywriting that says 7 and above to remind me of this lesson. So before I tell you exactly what 7 and above is, though, I'm going to just mention 3 things for you to think about. I talk about these a lot in therapy. So every person has your family of origin, which is the the family that you grew up with. It includes your lineage really throughout time. It's kind of scary to realize all the things that we've inherited. It's not scary if they're good, but sometimes it's scary if they're not good, like things we've inherited that we don't even realize: biology, and genetics, attitudes, habits. So you come from a family of origin. You also have your own personality. So I'm an only child, but for those of you who are blessed to have siblings, you may know that even in the same family, people with similar parents and growing up similar can have very different view of things that have happened in the family. And so you have your lineage, and then you have your unique personality, and then you have life experience. And a lot of times our life experience can reinforce certain wounds or painful things that have happened. And this is kind of the backdrop that I wanted to remind you of before we talk about 7 and above. So depending on your family and your life history, you may realize that there's people you can talk to and there's people that you just can't seem to talk to. And sometimes, like I said, these people can be very close to us. I think there's this idea like if somebody's in our family of origin or somebody close to us, we should be able to talk to them about things that have meaning for us and be able to share our views. But I think increasingly we see sometimes this is very hard. And so one of the reasons that I developed this model is because I don't know if you've heard this saying about insanity is when you try the same thing over. What's it saying? I don't know. Somebody else may know the saying, like when you keep trying the same thing and it just never works. And I have this very long history and another saying I've said, which is you can't talk to people you can't talk to. And sometimes like there's just people we just can't seem to talk to, but we keep trying to talk to them and then it just creates a lot of distress. So in the model 7 and above, had this idea of on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 would be somebody that you completely disagree with, but you can respect each other. So you can disagree even on topics of great meaning, but you feel heard, you feel validated, you can at least listen to each other, even if it gets heated, there's like respect. That would be a 10. 0 is that you disagree in the same way, like you have a disagreement of something of meaning, but you can't have any respectful, mutual, beneficial conversation. So 10 is that you disagree on something of importance, but you can really hear each other and talk about it and feel respected, mutual respect. And 0 is you disagree, but you can't seem to make any positive progress. Unless somebody's above a 7, are you ready? Don't talk to them. Now, hang in here with me because you're gonna be like, well, how's that possible? Okay. So if somebody's so first of all, it can be helpful just to identify. And I always say this isn't how much Jesus loves them or Buddha loves them or how much, they're loved, you know, how much their worthiness on the planet. It's a communication. So you're not judging. So this could be a parent who you love very much, but you actually can't have meaningful communication with them. So so part of it is if you're struggling and you're frustrated in communication and you're not really getting anywhere, it can be really helpful to do something in therapy we call becoming the observer, and you can just stand back and observe, okay, like what number would I rate communication with this person? And also, it can be different on different topics. So it's possible you could communicate with somebody pretty much 7 and above on a large variety of topics, but it could have to do with abortion rights, racial justice, Donald Trump, whatever, all these like hot topics, you could just not agree on a certain topic. So you can also break it down by topic. But so unless somebody rates as a 7, the reason I say to, for the most part, not talk to them is because you're going to get more drama and you're going to end up probably feeling bad and you're not going to accomplish much. Now, I'm going to quickly throw in an exception though. So sometimes if we've been silenced a lot, if we've been like as children, we've been silenced, or as victims, we've been silenced, or you struggle to find your voice. This is definitely not about shutting down someone's voice. It's really empowering to see, like, hey, I can't actually communicate in a meaningful way with this person. So I really need to stop trying. However, I always say you could still communicate with someone who rates below a 7 if you need to speak up, like on your soul's behalf, if you need to, if your inner child needs to speak up and be like, hey, don't treat me like this anymore. Or if someone is being victimized and you need to speak up. Like, there are occasions when somebody is well below a 7 and you need to either for the right of justice or for your own behalf to speak up. But I always say, just remember, it's probably not going to turn out very well, and that's okay. Like, you're just doing it for yourself. You just know it's probably not like they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for like saying this and have a eureka moment with rainbows and unicorns from the sky. Like, it's not likely going to happen. And it's quite likely that you're going to end up having more drama than if you had just remained silent. So there are cases when you would speak to somebody below a 7, but you would want to like step back, become the observer and be like, okay, like how does this person rate in ability to communicate and have respect? And if they're below a 7, what is my motivation in talking to them? and kind of get clear about that yourself. Because one of the things I've learned is that I often want to like explain myself, I want to be understood, I want to be heard. But there are some people that just are not going to get my point of view or respect me. We'll talk more about that before we're done today. Um, and so we just can put forth a lot of energy in relationships that really are just very exhausting and draining and stressful. And so again, you just want to like check in about what your motivation is of, are you trying to get somebody to agree with you? um are you trying like, just anyway, you get the idea. You want to check in about that. So the other thing I want to make a comment on is for you to be a 7 and above too. So we each, I would hope, would want to be people that could hold space and be respectful for someone whose ideas are different than ours. I find that very hard to hold space and be a 7 and above for people that are um like prejudice, say racial slurs, say like certain things. I have a hard time like remaining a 7 and above. So we all can get triggered to like, you know, um someone in my family has since my childhood used a racial slur, and it's always distressed me, and I remember since childhood always bringing it up. And my youngest son is biracial, and when we adopted him, I said to this person in my family, like, if you keep saying that racial slur, I will not come and see you anymore. Because I guess, having a child and who was biracial, being exposed to that was like the last straw. Like, okay, I'm not going to put up with this. So the racial slur ended all throughout my child's childhood. But when they got older, the family members started using that racial slur again. And I said, when I would visit, like, this is your home and you can speak however you want in your home, but I won't stay here if you if you speak like that. And so it's kind of like 7 and above is also checking in to set a boundary, like, okay, that person to me in this instance was not above a 7. Like, we could not have meaningful communication about a racial slur they were using. They weren't going to listen to me. I've complained about it my whole life, but they're a close family member. So like, to cut them off would, like, I mean, I have like limited contact with them, but it was like, I set a boundary to say, like, okay, you can be down here in these lower numbers and I can't communicate with you, but I also don't have to subject myself to that. And so, like, if this is your space, like, you can do whatever you want in your space, but I don't have to be a part of that. So that's just kind of like one example. And many times in my life, like, I have had, not many times, but a few key times in my life, I've had people that I've just tried forever and ever to communicate with. And then, I just finally realized, like, I can't communicate with this person like in a respectful way. And so sometimes you outgrow relationships. Family can be hard because it's harder to like fire your family or like cut them off, although people do that. But that's another thing that I wanted to mention, is that ideally we want to have people in our life who are a 7 and above in terms of communication. And some people will be like, well, is that only people that you agree with? But the model is, a 10 is that you can disagree, but that they will respect you. So it's not like, oh, we're going to have a life full of people that only agree with us, but we have a life full of people that only respect us. Right. And and that can be tricky because on some of these issues, like racial justice, social justice, like gender issues, it can be very hard. You almost feel like you don't respect someone if they have a different view. So it can be a lot of work to like hold space for someone that you just like almost violently disagree with, it can just go down the toilet like really fast. And so I don't think personally there's anything wrong with wanting to have in your circle of people, especially close to you, people that are 7 and above, because that means people that even if you disagree, there's respect. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is only talking to people that are above a 7 never means that you don't speak up on behalf of problems. Like I said earlier, it never means being a doormat. It never means being silenced. It's more about not getting caught into endless cycles of expecting people to be different than they are. And even though I'm a therapist and I'm very much into individual autonomy, if you knew the number of times in my life where I've tried to twist somebody's arm to like be different, you know, and I'm just going to give you a secret. Probably I was right. Okay. So like I'd be like, I mean, I think, okay, what I'm wanting is really a worthy ideal, and like it's reasonable to want to twist somebody's arm, like to get them to be more caring and to get them to be more loving and to be more thoughtful. But it's like we really can't, I found we really can't change other people who don't want to change. And the best thing is to just embody the goodness yourself, and to, you know, the stronger you are and the more confident you are, the more unshakable you are. And like then when somebody disagrees with you, going back to the beginning of our talk, you won't get triggered as much, because if something is a wound from your childhood or something very sensitive to you and somebody disagrees or they're below a 7, it's almost like they took a hook and like they're fishing and they just hooked right into you, and then you're like, "Wah," and so you want to keep doing your work to be confident, to be balanced, to remember to breathe. And you know, then when you encounter someone that's like doing something harmful or has an attitude that you struggle with, you can have more strength in how you deal with it than just being like sucked in to the emotion of it. And I always say, like, the more emotional you are, the more opportunity there is for healing. So if something really triggers you and it upsets you, it's really an opportunity for healing within yourself of like, hey, there's something in this subject that really distresses me, and what can I do to heal this? And again, that doesn't mean pushing things away. It's like, how can I transform this in a way it's almost like it's not as much of an electrical charge. So we're going to unplug the charge. And now, years after dealing with the family member who says what's to me very rude racial things, it's like I don't feel as emotional as I once did, but I feel as much or more conviction to be like, that's not okay. Like, whereas when I was younger, it might feel kind of like awkward. Like, here I am, like saying to adults, like, this isn't okay for you to talk this way about people. Now, instead of becoming like violently aggressive and upset about it, I'm like, no, like like this isn't going to work for me. But I don't have to get into some big battle about it. And it actually, in some ways, I'm not saying to not ever get emotional, because sometimes that can be helpful too, but it can be very helpful to not get emotional and just be like, I'm not going to do this. Like, if you're going to act like this, like, I'm out of here. And because then you're not attacking anyone, you're not getting into drama, you're just like, you have the right to do what you do, and I also have the right to not subject myself to this. So a lot of this that I'm talking about is more personal relationships, like with family and close people, but it can happen in work too. Like sometimes, somebody at work may do something that's upsetting. And I mean, the number of times I bring this up in therapy is like, okay, how would you rate this person if it's your boss? I know the boss at Advent is above a 7. Like Kevin better, I know he's above a 7. All the teams well above a 7. But many of us sometimes have to work with people, whether it's in your job or even if not in your office, some other person that's really not easy to communicate with. And I'm not saying, I mean, sometimes you have to talk to people that are below a 7, right? Like, what if this is something for your work and somebody's being really difficult and you have to deal with them and they're below a 7, that's where, well, then you need to come to Amy Williams Wellness. Just kidding. Or like get help, some therapy, life coaching with Brittany, something to like, if there's people in your life you really have to deal with, and it's hard to set a boundary because it's easier to set boundaries with family in a way as an adult. It's hard to set boundaries as a child because you're like stuck in your family. But as an adult, you can set more boundaries. But sometimes with work, we're kind of hostage in certain work situations or, groups we may be in. It's like you may need to work with somebody that's very difficult. And I think even then, even if you still have to communicate with somebody that you think is below a 7, just to know that, like, you just know that expectation, like, okay, this is somebody I can't talk to. Because I think some of us have this idealistic thing of like, we should be able to talk to anybody. And just to keep remembering, like, there's some people we just can't talk to. And like I said, we want to have more and more people that we can communicate with, even if we disagree. And that also strengthens you. So when you come across people that are like more challenging to talk with, it's not as distressing. Because if you had a life full of less than 4, 3, 2, like that would be so much more painful than if you have a life of people that are largely above 7 with an occasional 2 or 3 coming through. It's not as challenging. So I think that I know we're going to go till about 5 till. Let me see if there's anything else. Sam, do you have any questions right away, or did this make sense, or do you need me to explain anything else?
It absolutely makes sense to me, and we have a few different folks watching here, and Shamila has been commenting a lot. Thank you so much, Shamila, for being here. I love that you are working with your daughter to teach her just those skills of how to feel the emotions, but also be able to keep moving forward and communicate that. So we've had a few questions come in already, just message to us. Let me pull those up.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, so let's say you have no choice but to interact with someone who doesn't respect you. Maybe it's a work situation, who knows? But how can you protect yourself during those interactions?
I mean, if you have to work with or be around someone that does not respect you, I think it's so important to have quantum self care and to really, be compassionate with yourself, to have a strong support system, to have quantum or radical self care. Like, the more difficult people you have, the more self care you need and the more compassion to be in that, to be able to deal with that situation. Hopefully, something would change to that either that person would leave and get another job or you would leave and get another job, because it really is a painful way to live, but it does happen. I don't know. I mean, I guess more details might help. And if anybody wants to message me later with a specific, like, we don't even have to have it as a session. If there's a specific scenario you have that you would just like to send me, like, this is some more details, could you give me a couple tips? I would be glad to do that. But I think, I don't know if that really answers it. And if not, ask me, follow up and ask more. But that was my first thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had some experiences while working with customers who are just kind of no. And thankfully, I've kind of always been in jobs or fields where I can be like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
You can go now.
Yeah.
But not everyone is able to do
Do
that.
that. The other thing too I want to throw in is I love the book, The Four Agreements, and one of them is never don't take things personally, or it's not about you. And this is a hard concept because I was talking to somebody else this weekend about how don't take things personally. And they're like, but what if it is personal? Like, what if somebody says something personal, but it's still a reflection on them, right? And so it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you, right? But it's not about you, even if they're making it about you. Like their hatred, difficulty, whatever is really about them. They're making it about you, but don't take it personally. Doesn't mean you don't need support and to care for yourself and to do something about it. I mean, I don't know, maybe sometimes we need to file complaints about things if you can, but that can be hard. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember reading that book maybe late high school, and Shmila just asked the name of it. It's
The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, Ruiz. The
yeah,
Four Agreements. One of my favorite books. Yes.
yeah, that phrase, like it's not about me, has saved me so much like emotional energy, because someone could be having a really bad day. They could have experienced a tragedy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We have no idea in those moments. So
Yeah.
that can definitely help with communication.
But
Um,
also, I want to throw in being compassionate to other people doesn't mean not having boundaries and being a doormat either. And I make a big mistake on that because sometimes I explain people's rudeness away and like,
mm,
so you can have compassion on them, but also have compassion on yourself. And you might still be like, okay, I can see why they would be that way. It's still not okay for them to be that way. Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another question we had was around navigating group conversations, where you have some people that are a 7 and above and others that are not. How do you navigate those? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, have a good group facilitator. And, I think having a good group facilitator is super important who can validate people's differences, not cut people off, but also not give people too much of the floor. I have found that I think this will resonate with some people, that some populations are very vocal, and then other people will feel like they can't have a voice at all. Not to get too much into politics, but I saw that during politics. I mean, some people would be like very loud about their views, and then other people would really struggle being able to speak up. And so, if somebody's facilitating a group, I would really work on how to like have some formula where people could be heard, but not overbearing, if that makes sense. A little more structure, maybe, would be one idea. And even just having the check-in if somebody feels invalidated or not heard, that there's a way for them to give feedback. Because sometimes people can, the loud, like sometimes the 7 and belows can be very loud, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
especially most usually when they're white men who think
Yes.
they know a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Certain populations of privilege and
Mhm.
patriarchy can be very vocal. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And understanding, like, I really appreciate you saying, like, understanding, like, empathizing with people, and then also, like, not being that doormat, and understanding, like, the education that some folks are getting, or like access to knowledge, or like, I said white men, but like being told your whole life that you can do whatever you want and that you know a lot of things, that teaches you something. And so there's a lot of like things we can learn about someone by the way they communicate,
Yes.
um, as well.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, thank you so much, Amy. This has been really great. I wish we had more time. If folks want to connect with you, maybe get a session with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I mean, you can write me at amywilliamswellness@gmail.com. Is probably the easiest way. And I have a website, amywilliamswellness.com, which I think you can reach me that way too. But definitely reach out. And like I said, if someone wants a session or you just have some questions about a specific scenario, like I always want to be helpful. And um, life can be hard. And that's why I think it's so important to support each other. And that's one reason I just wanted to share this, because I think communication is so important. And we get stuck, and often the people with the biggest hearts feel the worst, right? Like whoever like, the sevens and aboves like feel bad, end up like they get into an argument with a three and then they feel bad about themselves, right? And so, and it's like I want to support people like having a voice and being heard and not feeling bad about it, because a lot of us have been put down. Like I remember I was always told don't speak unless spoken to, and it's like,
Mm.
who came up with that? Right? So if anyone listens to this and wants support, I'm glad to help.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. And thank you
Thank
to
you.
everyone who's joined us today and to everyone watching this later on our YouTube channel, Advent Co-working Videos. Advent Member Talks, it's a weekly event every Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. on Facebook Live. Next week, we have Cecilia coming in. She's going to be talking about ageism and how we can ensure that we have like thriving workplaces full of older adults. And these have been on Facebook Live for over a year now. We're figuring out how to start having hybrid events in person and still virtual. So also stay tuned for that. But thank you again. Hope to see you next week. Have a great evening.
Bye.